Well, I was pretty fired up on Friday. I have since calmed down, but I am, of course, very focused on speaking about this topic. There's so many things that we need to get into this week. When we talk about blackmail in general in DC, it is so obvious there is a blackmail ring. It is really just pathetic if any person can't just admit that. And you don't really need to be an expert on blackmail operations to understand that something is going on. A lot of this really is just common sense, right? I'll give you an example of something that should have struck everybody else as odd. Nobody willfully hangs out and works with somebody like Rabbi Shmuley, okay? This guy, literal goblin, Rumpelstiltskin in the flesh, okay? And everyone's watching him. Everyone agrees he's completely crazy. He outwardly, it seems, tries to extort people, tells people that they must donate this much money to his charity. And I don't even know if he's filing the right paperwork for his charity. If you don't do this, then I'm going to smear you as an anti-Semite and a Jew hater. And I'm just giving you just one example because this guy, just to be clear, is going to become a part of RFK Jr.'s campaign. This is Shmuley, how he decided to dress up for Purim last year.
Hi, everybody. Purim is a day of celebration. We feel bad for Candace Owens that she lost her job. So I figure with her image of what Jews are supposed to look like, why not at least validate her? I am dressed up as a Candace Owens Jew. Now, this is not a Christian child, this is a Jewish child. But if it would be, I got my Christian blood. Mmm, spicy, delicious. I got my Jewish nose. I have filth, because Jews are all filth. And more than anything else, what does Adi have? Money! Yeah, we Jews are all about money!
Speaking of all about money, here's an interesting story. In case you missed it, Rabbi Shmuley is currently being sued by the Fontainebleau Hotel. It's an incredible story. He was staying at this hotel in the lobby when somebody who is used to his rhetoric online decided to go up to him and to confront him and to call him names in the lobby. And then afterwards, for whatever reason, he thought this would be a great opportunity to shake down the Fontainebleau Hotel because nobody should speak to me like that anywhere. According to the Fontainebleau's lawsuit, he insisted that he would only settle if the Fontainebleau paid him $1 million. That's kind of one of the things he loves to ask for, to his charitable organization without any transparent explanation as to the use of those funds. He then went on social media, accused them of being Nazi collaborators, called them anti-Semitic. Essentially, I'm going to ruin your hotel reputation if you do not give me this $1 million to my personal charity. And, funny story, it turned out the people who own the Fontainebleau Hotel are in fact Jewish. So they went ahead and decided to sue him. And in that lawsuit, we learn that the rabbi actually had a similar incident at that exact same hotel in 2003. The hotel claimed to the news source, to the local news, that, quote, the rabbi omits that he also demanded personal lifetime access to the swimming pool and the gym at the hotel, the same place he says is unsafe. Ultimately, the defendant accepted a free dinner at the hotel and moved on. And when he was asked about this lawsuit being sued by a prominent Jewish family for trying to smear and libel them and to, according to them at least, shake them down, extort them, he said, quote, that's exactly what Jews have been accused of. It's almost like the lawsuit is from the protocols of the elders of Zion. Yeah, so he's still calling them anti-Semitic. The reason I'm bringing this up is because there is no halfway decent person in the world who thinks I would like to become the president of the United States. In order for me to get there, I think this guy, Rabbi Shmuley, would be well suited to be on my campaign. It's always been very strange that RFK Jr. is always has Rabbi Shmuley in the background, especially given the allegations that were made against him by Michael Jackson. He's a very problematic character. Again, that is just obvious point number one, which we will eventually come back to. Now, when it comes to RFK Jr. himself, he's actually always been refreshingly honest about his past issues with impulse control. He's been very honest about his past heroin addiction and how his drug addictions led to sexual impulse problems. Again, all things that can be understood. And actually, I think fostering those conversations is really a good thing for America. More broadly speaking, though, when we consider blackmail operations, there is almost always a sexual component. And I'm talking about when we just take a look through American history, especially those of us that have read this book, Chaos, right? We learn a lot about these drug-fueled sex parties that were aided by the CIA and their mind control experiments with LSD, which they were distributing freely throughout the 60s. It was a central fixture of the 1960s in general. For those of you who are kind of new to understanding that or hearing that, and you may have grown up thinking, as I did, that the hippies movement, the hippies generation was just totally organic, love, sex, rock and roll, think again, okay? It actually is directly tied to incredibly influential people in history who worshipped a religion called Thelema. Aleister Crowley, who was once dubbed the most wicked man in the world, they very much believed in sort of these hippie communes before they were hippie communes, and they brought in psychiatrists and the elites to have these sex parties which involved these drugs and experimentation. And it gets so crazy. If you guys go back in my catalog, we talk about NASA, their connection. Essentially, just understand that the elites and the government were on board with this, and the population eventually became a victim of what they were on board with, I would say, in the 60s. And this book does a really good job unpacking all the lies of the Manson murders. He was very connected to the elites. Join my book club if you want to learn more about that. We'll be meeting tomorrow. Anyways, what I want to say, and the reason why I'm bringing that up, is because I do not believe in the Kennedy curse. Everyone talks about the Kennedy curse. Oh, there have been plane crashes, and JFK got shot, and RFK got shot. I don't believe in a curse. I am, however, a believer in the idea that the CIA has kept incredibly close tabs on this family since they shot JFK. Who is they? Who is they? Since they shot JFK. Okay, fun fact learned from this book, which was supposed to be about the Manson murders. This guy was amazing, Tom O'Neill, who went through just so much documentation that was hidden throughout the 60s and how the psychiatrists were involved, as I said, in drugging people, trying to get them to commit crimes, trying to get them to kill people, involving themselves in the sex cults and hypnosis. Well, you know, the official story, which we now know is just simply not true or never thought were true if you were like me, is that Lee Oswald Harvey shot JFK, and then he said he didn't shoot him, but then before, of course, we could hear from Lee Oswald Harvey, there was a guy named Jacob Rubenstein who shot Lee Oswald Harvey, and nobody really knew why he did that, right? The Warren Commission, why did he do that? Well, we learned from this book that he was MK Ultra'd while awaiting trial. Now, in case you don't know what MK Ultra is, it's even with the majority of the documents having been destroyed by the CIA, what was actually left over is so shocking to understand that they were using hypnosis. And what they were trying to do was to see if they could create a truth serum. They were trying to see if they could implant ideas into people's minds as another component of it. And they were also trying to see if they could give people a cocktail of drugs that would just make them go crazy. So they wouldn't even know what they did. So if you were Jacob Rubenstein and you were a part of this assassination squad or a part of the day they're planning to kill him, and you think that you're in the in crowd and then they want to turn on you, they can give you a concoction of drugs and they can make you crazy. You won't remember anything. And a person who was leading those experiments was a psychiatrist named Dr. Jolly West. He was a part of this obsession with trying to see whether or not they could give people mental conditions. And so what he discovers is that Dr. Jolly West paid Jacob Rubenstein a visit in prison before he was due to see the judge. I'm just going to read directly from this book. This is page 343, just this one little paragraph. After John F. Kennedy was assassinated in November of 1963, West psychiatrically examined Jack Ruby, who had murdered Kennedy's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, not long before Ruby was due to testify for the Warren Commission. West examined him alone in his jail cell. He emerged to report that Ruby had suffered an acute psychotic break. Sure enough, Ruby's testimony before the commission succeeded only in making him sound unhinged. He could never fully explain why he'd decided to kill Oswald. Fascinating. A cocktail of drugs that can make people crazy. This kind of makes you think about Britney Spears, makes you think about what Kanye was trying to say they tried to do to him when he was put on a Psych 5150 hold. It opens a lot. Let's stay focused on the Kennedys because that's what we're here to talk about. RFK, JFK's brother, certainly had an idea of who may have killed his brother. And I would say he was not accepting the official storyline that it was just Lee Harvey Oswald. He was also at this time amassing a ton of political power. Of course, they were a tremendously powerful political family in politics. He was a senator, and he was gaining a lot of steam throughout the Democratic presidential primaries in the summer of 1968. Now, you got to think, if you're the deep state and you have just gone through such great lengths to kill the guy who you didn't want to have in office, the guy who didn't want to have nuke, didn't want to send any weapons over, didn't want the nuclear Dimona reactor in Israel done. You're trying to block AIPAC. You kill this guy to stop all of that. Then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, he's got a brother. And now he's looking like he might become the president. Man, how are you going to stop that, right? I'm just saying how are you going to stop that? Anyways, so he's cooking through these presidential primaries. For those of you that were not alive, like I was not alive during this. And he had just won the states of South Dakota and California. On June 5th, he is addressing his campaign supporters at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, okay? He concludes his remarks, he exits the stage, and the security begins escorting him through the back kitchen when suddenly, you're not going to believe this, it's so perfect, an anti-Zionist Palestinian walks up and shoots him, and he dies. He's declared dead at the Good Samaritan Hospital the next day, 25 hours later. Perfect. That is, oh my gosh, these Palestinians, you just cannot control them. Except that story doesn't appear to be entirely true either. By the way, not even RFK Jr., we're not in conspiracy land, not even RFK Jr., who visited Saran, the person who they say shot him, the Palestinian who they said shot and killed him in prison. RFK Jr. visited him. He doesn't even believe that story. Okay, this is the Washington Post. Who killed Bobby Kennedy? His son, RFK Jr., doesn't believe that it was Saran. You would have thought, by the way, that we would have all heard about this back in 2016. But we didn't, or at least I didn't, unless maybe I was under a rock. But even the people who were present when he was shot testified that Saran didn't kill him, but rather someone from behind RFK shot and killed him. Okay, take this guy, Paul Schrade, for example. This is a picture of Paul Schrade in 2016. Paul Schrade, at the age of 91 years old, appeared at Saran's parole hearing. Schrade was also shot at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. He was there in the back. He got shot by Saran. And yet here he is appearing for him to be released on parole. And he apologized for missing Saran's 14 previous parole hearings. He told Saran at that time, quote, "I should have been here long ago, and that's why I feel guilty for not being here to help you and to help me." After the hearing, while Saran was being taken away, Schrade shouted, "Saran, I am so sorry this is happening to you. It is my fault." I'm sorry, what? You're saying sorry to the guy who shot you and the guy who shot RFK dead? Well, that's not the whole truth. What happened is not the whole truth. Well, at least what was presented to the public was not, if you believe Paul. And here is what he told the parole officers. I'm going to read you his remarks, which, as I said, you would have thought with the mainstream media these would have gone viral, but I guess they were busy doing other stuff. Now I'm going to skim through this, but we'll start with how he addresses them. He says, "I am Paul Schrade of Los Angeles. I am 91 years old, and back when I was 43, I was among 6 persons shot at the old Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles at just after midnight on June 5th, 1968. I was shot along with Senator Robert F. Kennedy, who had just won California's Democratic primary election for the presidency of the United States. 5 of us survived our wounds, and as history knows, Senator Kennedy was fatally wounded." Saran Bishara Saran was originally scheduled for release in 1984, but after intense political pressure, his parole date was rescinded, and he has since been denied 14 times. In order for you to make an accurate determination of Saran's parole, you need to know my feelings on this case and the full picture of what actually happened. Saran, I forgive you. The evidence clearly shows that you were not the gunman who shot Robert Kennedy. There is clear evidence of a second gunman in that kitchen pantry who shot Robert Kennedy. One of the bullets, the fatal bullet, struck Bob in the back of the head. Two bullets struck Bob literally in his back. A fourth bullet struck the back of his coat's upper right seam and passed harmlessly through his coat. I believe all four of those bullets were fired from a second gunman standing behind Bob. You were never behind Bob, nor was Bob's back ever exposed to you. Indeed, Saran, the evidence not only shows that you did not shoot Robert Kennedy, but it shows that you could not have shot Robert Kennedy. Several days ago, I made sure that several documents were submitted to this board for you to review. If you have not done so as yet, I would ask you to please review them very carefully during your deliberation. I will be glad to resubmit these documents to you here today. I believe after you review these documents that it should become clear to you that Saran did not shoot and could not have shot Robert Kennedy. What I'm saying to you is that Saran himself was a victim. Obviously, there was someone else there in that pantry also firing a gun. While Saran was standing in front of Bob Kennedy and his shots were creating a distraction, the other shooter secretly fired at the senator from behind and fatally wounded him. Bob died 25 hours later. First, I want to show you this. It's a letter written in 2012 by my good friend, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr. Bobby wrote this letter to Eric Holder, who was then the Attorney General of the United States. In his letter to Mr. Holder, Bobby requests that the federal authorities examine the Brzezinski recording. Say that again, the Brzezinski recording, the only known audio recording made of his father's assassination at the Ambassador Hotel. The recording was uncovered in 2004 at the California State Archives by CNN International writer Brad Johnson. So somehow this recording was basically buried until somebody accidentally discovered it all the way in 2004. The next document is a federal court declaration from audio expert Philip von Prague, who Johnson recruited to analyze that Brzezinski recording. In this document, von Prague declares that his analysis of the recording concludes that two guns were fired in the Robert Kennedy shooting. Von Prague found a total of 13 gunshots in the Brzezinski recording. Saran's one and only gun at the crime scene held no more than 8 bullets, and Saran had no opportunity to reload it. Von Prague also found what he describes as double shots, meaning 2 gunshots fired so close together that they could not have both come from Saran's Ivor Johnson cadet revolver. Von Prague actually found 2 sets of these double shots. Additionally, he found that 5 of the 13 gunshots featured a unique audio resonance characteristic that could not have been produced by Saran's gun model, meaning those 5 shots were fired from a second gun of a different make. Von Prague further found that those 5 gunshots were fired in a direction heading away from Brzezinski's microphone. These documents are statements from 2 witnesses to the Robert Kennedy shooting. Both of them were assistant maitre d's for the Ambassador Hotel. These 2 men, Carl Uecker and Edward Menasian, escorted Robert Kennedy to the kitchen pantry immediately after the senator delivered his victory speech in a hotel ballroom for having won the California primary. Both Uecker and Menasian say that Saran was in front of Bob Kennedy as the senator walked towards Saran, meaning that Bob and Saran were facing each other. Both witnesses say Saran was still in front of Bob as Saran fired his gun, and both say that after Saran fired his first 2 shots, Uecker quickly pushed Saran against a steam table, placing Saran in a headlock while grabbing a hold of Saran's firing arm, forcing the tip of Saran's gun to point away from where Bob Kennedy was and causing Saran to fire blindly his remaining 6 bullets. In other words, Saran only had full control of his gun at the beginning when he fired his first 2 shots, one of which hit me. This document is the official Robert Kennedy autopsy report summary. It shows that all bullets directed at Senator Kennedy were fired from behind him at point-blank range. As the autopsy states, and as these drawings show, the bullets traveled from the back to the front at steep upward trajectories. 1 bullet struck Senator Kennedy at the back of the head, 2 bullets at the right rear armpit, and a 4th bullet at the right rear shoulder of his jacket, which passed harmlessly through his jacket. Again, Saran's bullets could not have struck the back of Bob Kennedy's head or the back of his body or the back of his jacket's right shoulder. These are documents from the LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Department, that reveal the LAPD misconduct in the police investigation of the Robert Kennedy murder. They detail evidence that was destroyed while Saran's appeal was still pending, as well as a photograph that was acknowledged by the LAPD to be effective rebuttal but was withheld from the defense team. Indeed, the LAPD and the LA County District Attorney knew 2 hours after the shooting of Senator Kennedy that he was shot by a second gunman, and they had conclusive evidence that Saran could not and did not do it. The official records show the prosecution at Saran's trial never had one witness. They had no physical nor ballistic evidence to prove that Saran shot Bob Kennedy. Evidence locked up for 20 years shows that the LAPD destroyed physical evidence and hid ballistic evidence exonerating Saran, and covered up conclusive evidence that a second gunman fatally wounded Robert Kennedy. This document is a memo written by criminologist Larry Baguette, who investigated the Robert Kennedy shooting for the LAPD. The Baguette memo states that the bullets that hit Senator Kennedy and William Weasel, another shooting victim in the pantry, were not fired from the same gun. The memo also states the bullet that traveled upward through Bob Kennedy's body and into his neck was not fired from Saran's revolver. Such a finding would be proof that Saran did not shoot Robert Kennedy. He goes on and he wraps it up by saying, again, Saran was not originally scheduled for release in 1984, but after intense political pressure, his parole date was rescinded and he has since been denied 14 times. Again, gentlemen, I believe you should grant Saran parole. And I ask you to do that today in the name of Robert F. Kennedy and in the name of justice. Thank you. That concludes my remarks. Now, for those of us who are a part of the book club and those of us who have read Chaos, to hear him speak about the corruption of the LAPD, and we have understood that the CIA was involved with the LAPD just by understanding how much the public was lied to about the Manson murders, and knowing that all this was happening at the same time. This book, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s, it's insane because all of these pieces are just starting to come together. And then it makes you wonder who would have, if this man is to be believed, and it's very difficult to believe that a 91-year-old would make all of this up. Why? What would be his reason? He was literally shot by Saran and is taking a stand and saying that this is ridiculous and that this has become political and that there was corruption and that actually this guy was just supposed to be the person who was blamed. Very similar to what we are learning about the JFK shooting. You get one guy who you're supposed to put the blame on, and how did that guy get crazy? Oh, I'm going to guess he was probably MK Ultra, Saran. But how perfect the story. Anti-Zionist Palestinian kills a beloved Kennedy. Kennedy curse, guys? Nah, I'm thinking more like Operation Every Kennedy. Operation Keep Tabs on every member of this important political family always and forever. And one way to do that, if you wanted to keep tabs on every member of this family, would be to render them impotent with drug addiction, sex addictions, fueling their addictions and keeping tabs on them, learning what they're doing while they're high, right? Again, I am pulling this from everything I have learned about the 60s, everything that I have learned while looking at all of these case files pertaining to the Kennedys. And curiously enough, you're not going to believe this, right? Did you know that RFK Jr., yeah, that RFK Jr., the one running HHS, shortly after his father was murdered in 1968, while the MK Ultra program was in full swing, offering LSD and trying to control people's minds and getting them to do things and commit crimes and sexual acts. Well, he very shortly after his father's funeral got offered LSD from strangers. I'm not kidding. He went onto Sean Ryan's show and he spoke to him about that moment. Take a listen to RFK Jr. speaking about that.
When I was 15 years old, I never even drank coffee. And I went to that summer, the summer after my dad died, I went to a party for an elder brother of a friend of mine. I was hitchhiking home from that party, and an older boy picked me up, and who I knew, but not that well. And he offered me some LSD. And I had never taken any kind of drug before. I had a trip that was probably 10 hours, and I had a great time. And I ended up going into town and, just having a great time. But by the morning time, I was crashing. I was walking home and getting darker and darker, 3 miles from town back to my house. And just before I got to my house, I saw some older boys in the woods. I went in there to see what they were doing, and I told them I was crashing on the acid. And they said, here, try some of this. And I had been telling myself, I'm never going to do this again, right? Mm-hmm. And they said, try some of this. And it was crystal meth. And I took a snort of it, and I felt great. And that incident was the template for my addiction over the next 14 years.
I would love to know who exactly those families were, who exactly those boys were who were plying him with drugs. It would just be interesting to know those facts. Anyways, as I told you on Friday, there have been some extraordinary rumors that have been circulating about RFK Jr., and I did not say this because I don't want RFK Jr. to be successful in his role. Of course I do. I am the queen of being anti-vax. I obviously have created an entire series, and I've been very clear about the fact that if it was not for his catalog of work, I could not have created my catalog of work. And so he has contributed something for which I believe the entire world owes him tremendous gratitude. But I have never been under any illusions that RFK Jr. was not in some capacity being controlled. That has never, as soon as I saw him with Rabbi Shmuley, and he couldn't explain why that was. And as soon as I was watching his interviews with Dave Smith, and he couldn't explain why he couldn't lodge even one critique of Israel, I got very suspicious. Without getting into the gossip elements of what I have learned, what I would kind of instead do is rely on the obvious understanding that he still appears to have issues with impulse control. I think that's a fair assessment, right? That is best evidenced by the fact that despite running for president of the United States and knowing that he would be under intense scrutiny, that all eyes would be on him, he still engaged in a rather high-risk behavior when he decided to start a sexting relationship with a mainstream media journalist, Olivia Nuzzi, who was adversarial to him. Okay, that right there, forgetting who said what, that right there tells you that he is not fully able to control himself. And people who cannot control themselves will find themselves being controlled. Without getting into further details at this moment about what I know and what I have been told, I can tell you that one name that kept coming up is Amaryllis Fox. Now, I've never heard of Amaryllis Fox. I'll tell you a little bit about her. She's actually quite extraordinary what she's accomplished in her life. She's a former CIA officer, born Amaryllis Thornburg. She attracted the CIA's attention when she was really young, while she was pursuing her master's degree. When, after the September 11th attacks, she created an algorithm to identify local terrorist safe havens. And I'm just going to read you a couple of more high points from her teenage years, okay? At the age of 18, this is from her Wikipedia. In 1999, at the age of 18, she secretly recorded an interview for the BBC with the Burmese leader, Aung San Suu, then under house arrest. And in order to arrange the meeting, Fox worked with a local dissident journalist, okay? We're talking, this is crazy for an 18-year-old, with whom she was communicating with via taped messages that were inside the water tank of a toilet at a cafe in Rangoon. Her intent in going overseas in that trip had been to make a secret recording of a planned pro-democracy protest that was supposed to take place on September 9th. Yeah, pro-democracy protest, the CIA, an 18-year-old. It's giving color revolution, okay? Her Wikipedia goes on to say that Fox became one of the CIA's youngest female officers at age 22, assigned to quote-unquote non-official cover, which entailed her living abroad with fake identities and no diplomatic protection. She has said she assumed the cover of an art dealer and focused on preventing terror organizations from acquiring, you guessed it, weapons of mass destruction. Every time, weapons of mass destruction. She ended up marrying another fellow agent named Dean Fox. That's how her name became Agent Fox, who she met while she was undercover in Shanghai. So she had been all over the world undercover, which I always think about, what does that do to your brain when you lie for a living? You lie about who you are for a living. You pretend to be someone that you're not. Anyways, her and Dean Fox eventually got divorced. And then you're never going to guess what happened in her life. After 8 years at the agency, she left the CIA in 2010, which I always wonder, do you ever just leave the CIA? Is that actually a thing? Can you really get another job after? Do they just let you go in the CIA? What happens to a person when they leave the CIA? Anyways, I'll tell you what happened to her. Then she went to a Burning Man festival. I know what you're thinking. You're like, whoa, you mean like the Burning Man festival, middle of the desert, a bunch of kids high on LSD, tons of love drugs, connecting with one another. Yeah, she went to a Burning Man festival. And a mutual friend of hers introduced her to RFK Jr.'s son, RFK the third. Yeah. And they just fell in love, which many people do at the Burning Man festival, I would imagine. It's all about love, and it's community. It's like hippie community, I would say. And they got married in Cape Cod in 2018. And by 2023, she was working for RFK Jr.'s, her father-in-law's presidential campaign. Beautiful stuff, guys. That's it. I just wanted to tell you a beautiful, beautiful love story. Just love that so much. Anyway, she's obviously very smart and capable. I just think it's kind of weird that she would let a guy like Rabbi Shmuley near her father-in-law, right? I mean, all that CIA experience and nothing seemed off to her about that connection, that friendship. Anyways, you guys know me. I am just asking questions. I don't know why. I'm just always just asking questions, and we will continue this. I just think it would be more fun to continue it with Ian Carroll, and I'm trying to make that happen, and we can kind of tell you guys what are the rumors that are circulating. And again, I want to inform you guys, this is not because anybody has any ill will towards RFK. Like I said, we were both massively supportive of everything that he is doing and would like to keep him focused on what he should be doing, which is actually going after health issues and our children, not declaring pandemics and epidemics over racism and anti-Semitism. That's just not what he's in there for. And it's problematic. And we have to be serious if we want to take back our country, of confronting the initial takeover of our country, which I believe happened on the day that JFK was shot. We have to have brave conversations. We have to be willing to be called conspiracy theorists. We have to be willing to be attacked nonstop by journalists. We have to be willing to be called anti-Semitic. We have to be willing to be called Adolf Hitler. We have to be willing to be called every name in the book if we are going to save our country. That's my belief from the bottom of my heart.